There are highways in America that stretch for hundreds of miles, cutting through barren land where nothing but shadows keep you company. Truckers whisper about certain roads, the ones that feel wrong the moment you set your tires on them. One of these is an endless stretch of asphalt in the south. It looks ordinary at first, just a two-lane road winding through farmland. But some drivers claim that once you're on it, you can't leave. Every exit loops back. Every mile marker looks the same. The gas gauge ticks down, the clock advances, but the scenery never changes. A man named Daniel told this story. He was driving home after visiting family late at night. He remembers the digital clock on his dashboard, reading 1:42 a.m. when he first turned onto the road. The night was silent, his headlights carving through the darkness. For a while it felt normal, just another lonely highway. But then he noticed something. The same gas station appeared 3 times. At first he thought there were just multiple locations of the same chain, but each station was identical down to the flickering light above the entrance and the stray dog lying by the door. The second time he passed it, his stomach twisted. The third time, panic set in. He tried every exit, every turn, but each one bent back onto the same highway. He drove faster. The clock on his dashboard moved forward. 2:13, 2:48, 3:27, but his GPS still showed the same road. Then his phone lost signal. Not even emergency calls went through. He drove for hours, trapped in this loop, until exhaustion pulled at his eyelids. Just when he thought he couldn't go on, the road ended in a single red stoplight. There was nothing else, no intersection, no buildings, just the stoplight swaying in the wind. He slammed the brakes. As his car idled, the light turned green. And suddenly, he was back on a regular highway, his GPS showing he was only 5 miles from home. When he pulled into his driveway, the sun was rising. But something didn't make sense. His dashboard clock read 6:02 a.m., yet when he looked at his phone, the time said 1:56 a.m. The night had repeated itself. Daniel refuses to drive at night anymore. He says some highways don't just take you places. Sometimes they take from you time, sanity, maybe even something deeper. The hotel room that doesn't exist. Hotels are strange places if you think about it. Hundreds of people come and go every night, sleeping in beds where strangers have slept before, leaving behind memories, energy, sometimes something darker. Most hotels have their share of ghost stories, but one chain has a particular legend. Room 617. Travelers who have stayed in certain old hotels across the country tell the same story. They check in, they're given the key to 617, and everything feels normal at first. But the moment they step inside, the air turns heavy. The lights flicker. The walls feel too close. It's not just another room. It's a place that doesn't want you there. One man, a business traveler named Stephen, swore he booked into a downtown hotel in Chicago. The clerk gave him his key card and told him his room was on the 6th floor. When he found it, the door looked older than the others. Paint peeling, the number slightly crooked. Inside, the room was outdated. The wallpaper peeled in places. The air smelled of mold and iron. The furniture was mismatched, decades old, like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. He shrugged it off. He was exhausted. But around 2 a.m., Stephen woke up to a scratching sound at the closet door. At first faint, then louder, like long nails dragging across wood. He sat up, heart pounding, staring at the door handle. Slowly it began to turn. He rushed to the hallway, but when he pulled the door open, there was no hallway, just darkness, a black void stretching endlessly. He panicked, slammed the door, and hid in the bathroom until dawn. When he checked out the next morning, he mentioned the strange room to the desk clerk. The clerk frowned and said, "Sir, we don't have a room 617. The 6th floor only has 15 rooms." Stephen demanded to be taken upstairs. When the manager escorted him, the hallway ended where his door had been. No door, no peeling paint, no crooked number. Just smooth wall. To this day, he swears he still dreams about that room. And whenever he does, he wakes up with scratches on the inside of his bedroom closet door. The midnight radio station. Some people like to leave the radio on at night just for background noise. A comfort, a reminder that the world is still awake while you drift off to sleep. But for those who tune too far down the dial, There's a station you're not supposed to hear. Listeners call it Station 94.8, though it doesn't appear on any official listings. It only comes through between 2 and 3 a.m., and only in certain places. Static will suddenly fade, and then you'll hear it. An old, grainy broadcast. The voice of a man, calm and monotone, reading things that shouldn't be known. One woman in Pennsylvania swore she tuned into the station while driving late at night. The announcer was listing names, first names, followed by times. She didn't understand what it meant until she heard her own name. Then the voice calmly said, 342. Terrified, she pulled over and waited. At exactly 3:42, a car sped through the intersection she would have been crossing if she hadn't stopped. It smashed into another vehicle at full speed. She realized if she hadn't pulled over, that crash would have killed her. Others report darker encounters. A truck driver claimed he heard the station describe him in real time. The voice listed what he was wearing, the route he was taking, even the song playing on his CD player. Then it said, he won't make it to sunrise. He swears that at that exact moment, a black sedan with no headlights appeared in his rearview mirror and tailed him for miles. He managed to lose it, but when he reached his destination and asked the locals about the strange station, one old man simply said, "Don't ever answer when the host says your name." The reason? Some claim that those who acknowledge the broadcast, who respond out loud, even just a single word, are never seen again. Their cars are found abandoned on the roadside, the radios still tuned to 94.8, and the announcer's voice? Sometimes, if you listen closely, it sounds less like a man and more like something imitating one. Every skyscraper has its secrets, hidden rooms, locked doors, service corridors that only staff know about. But sometimes the strangest secrets lie in the elevators. There's an urban legend about certain buildings, usually older hotels or business towers, where pressing the right sequence of buttons will take you to a floor that doesn't exist. Not underground, not above the penthouse. A place between places. A college student named Alex swore he experienced this while staying in an old hotel during a research trip. Late one night, after studying in the lobby, he stepped into the elevator. He hit the button for the 7th floor, but the car didn't move. Instead, all the lights flickered and the elevator began to descend. Past the lobby, past the basement. The floor indicator stopped at -1. The doors slid open to a hallway he had never seen before. The walls were bare concrete, wet with condensation. The air smelled of rust and rot. Dim, flickering bulbs lined the ceiling, but half of them were dead, leaving long stretches of shadow. He stepped out cautiously, his phone light barely cutting through the gloom. Every door was marked only with numbers, 3 digits scratched into the metal. 104, 107, 113. None of it made sense. Then he heard it, breathing. Slow, heavy, coming from down the hall. Something was waiting in the dark. He turned back to the elevator, but the doors were already closing. He lunged forward, shoving his hand through just in time. Inside the car, he frantically hit the button for the lobby. The elevator groaned, shuddered, then rose. When the doors opened again, he was back in the brightly lit lobby. The concierge gave him a puzzled look. He had been gone for 3 hours. Alex never found that hallway again, no matter how many times he rode the elevator. But sometimes, late at night, his phone buzzes with missed calls from unknown numbers. The caller ID? 3-digit sequences that match the doors he saw that night. The vanishing village. There are places on Earth that seem to disappear from maps, swallowed whole by time. Old mining towns abandoned when the resources dried up. Small communities lost to floods or fire. But some villages vanish in ways that can't be explained. Places that locals swear existed only a generation ago. Yet now there's nothing left but fields and trees. One such story comes from the Appalachian Mountains. Travelers talk about a place they call Dunridge, though you won't find that name on any official record. For decades, hikers and hunters claim to stumble across it. Always by accident, always at dusk. A cluster of weathered wooden houses, a church with a leaning steeple, a cracked stone well in the center of a dirt square. The village seemed deserted, but faint sounds carried on the wind, children laughing, a hymn sung low and off-key, the creak of wagon wheels. One man named Thomas told his account in detail. He was exploring the mountains in the late 1990s following an old game trail. Just as the sun was setting, he crested a hill and saw the village below him. The air felt colder, sharper, as though he'd stepped through an invisible threshold. He entered cautiously. The houses looked abandoned, windows dark, roofs sagging under years of rot. Yet every door was shut tight, and every path between them looked freshly walked. He swore he could smell cooking meat, hear the faint buzz of conversation from inside the houses. When he knocked, no one answered. But when he turned away, he thought he heard whispers through the door. Drawn to the well at the village center, Thomas peered inside. The stone was damp, slick with moss. The water far below shimmered faintly, though the moon hadn't risen yet. And then, echoing up from the darkness, came the sound of something splashing, followed by a voice. It was quiet at first, like someone calling from far underground. But the longer he listened, the louder it grew, until he swore it was his own name being called. Panicked, Thomas backed away. That's when he noticed movement in the houses, curtains twitching, shadows gathering in the windows, faces staring out, pale and blurred, as though the glass distorted them into shapes that weren't quite human. The church bell tolled then, deep and hollow, though the bell tower looked rusted and broken. He ran. The path twisted back into the woods, but when he turned for one last glance, the village was already gone. Where the church had stood was nothing but trees. Where the well had been, only weeds and earth. When he told his story later, locals nodded knowingly. Some said Dunridge was a village that died out in the 1800s after a plague. Others claimed the townsfolk had made a pact, something unholy, and when the bargain soured, the entire place was cursed to fade from the world, only to return now and then, hungry for new souls. A historian who researched it found one curious detail, a single newspaper clipping from 1871 mentioning an outbreak of disease in the mountain settlement of Dunridge. No other records exist, no census, no maps, no deeds. Just that single mention, like a ghost trace. But hikers still whisper. They say if you're walking in those mountains at dusk and the wind carries the sound of a bell, you should turn back immediately, because if you reach the village and hear your name called from the well, you might never find your way out again. The whispering woman in the woods forests have always carried a certain unease. By day they are alive with birdsong and wind in the trees, but by night they change. The silence becomes heavy, the darkness absolute, and the deeper you go, the more it feels like something is watching. In Northern Europe, there are tales of the whispering woman, a figure said to roam the woods after dusk. She is not a ghost in the traditional sense. Witnesses describe her as solid, flesh and blood, but wrong somehow. Too tall, her limbs just slightly too long, her movements too smooth, as though she glides rather than walks. The legend says she calls you by name, always in a whisper, always in a voice you recognize. Some hear their mother's voice, some their lover's, others their own. And once you answer, once you acknowledge her, she follows. One night, a group of campers set up their tents on the edge of a forest. It was late autumn, the trees bare, the ground littered with leaves. After a long evening of stories and drinks around the fire, they retreated to their tents. Sometime past midnight, one of them, a girl named Elise, woke to the sound of footsteps circling the camp. She thought maybe it was one of her friends returning from the trees, but then she heard her name. Elise. The voice was soft, familiar, but she couldn't place it. She unzipped her tent just slightly, peeking out. At the edge of the fire's dying glow stood a woman. Her back was to Elise at first, but slowly she turned. Her face was pale, her eyes too wide, and her mouth didn't move with the whisper. Elise! The girl froze. She wanted to call out to her friends, but her throat locked. The woman lifted her arm and beckoned with one long finger. Then she tilted her head in a jagged, unnatural way, as if bones were shifting beneath her skin. Panicked, Elise shut the tent, buried her face in her sleeping bag, and prayed for morning. But the whisper continued all night, circling the tent, always just outside the thin fabric walls. At dawn, the other campers found her pale, trembling, and nearly catatonic. She swore the woman had stayed until the first rays of sunlight touched the ground. None of her friends had heard the whispers. None of them had seen the figure. Local folklore warns, if you hear her, never reply. Never step toward the voice, because those who do are found days later, deep in the woods, faces frozen in terror, ears stained with dried blood, as if the whisper itself had clawed its way inside. Some forests still carry her legend. Hikers report strange sounds, names carried on the wind, a figure just at the edge of vision, and if you camp there, they say, you should never sleep too close to the tree line, because the whispering woman doesn't knock, she doesn't wait, she simply calls and hopes you'll answer. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But remember, stories like these don't just come from imagination, they come from whispers, from sightings, from people who swear they've lived them. Which story unsettled you the most tonight? The endless highway, the hotel room that doesn't exist, the radio that knows your name, or the whispering woman who waits in the trees? Tell me in the comments which one kept you up the most. And if you've ever had a chilling encounter of your own, share it. Your story might be the next one we tell here. And if you want more nights like this, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join me again for more stories you'll wish you hadn't heard in the dark.